Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. Today we mark day 469 since the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip had launched an onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering 1,200 mostly civilians. Some 4,800 others have been wounded in that horrific attack, and roughly 250 people, including elderly, men, women, children, infants, have been taken captive by this Islamist terror organization. And thankfully, today, deal was approved in order to return a number of them, hopefully all of them in 3 stages, but time will tell. And for that, let's turn now to central Israel, where we're joined by the former IDF chief of cyber staff, an Israel Air Force commander, as well as a fighter pilot, namely Brigadier General in Reserve Yaron Rosen. It's good to see you, General. In 2 days' time, day 471, since Hamas perpetrated its onslaught and massacre, we may see yet again a small number as a first installment return to their loved ones. We don't know in what state they will be returned, and that is something that the entire country here in Israel are bracing for.
Yeah, this exchange of hostages and prisoners from both sides is quite unbelievable. How this is conducted, how you make a deal with this devil and try to release all these people that have been in captive for so long. It's gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, and we actually will not know until the last minute what exactly the state of each one is. That is part of the psychological warfare that Hamas is enjoying to do because it doesn't have anything else to do after Israel has mostly decimated Gaza and the Hamas. But now this is what we have to go through. This is the price we have to go through to pay to get everyone released. And this is the right thing to do. I think that the most complex thing about this deal, that it is a phased release over 6 weeks, roughly. And the challenge will be to, keep on the release momentum from both sides, to make sure that no side is changing the deal as the deal goes, as it was in the last 48 hours. I'm sure, because this is the Hamas, that things will change along the way, and it will be a challenging 6 weeks. And then the challenge will be to continue the deal with Bibi's political state. The government may not hold after the first phase, after these first 6 weeks. So we are in for a very, very long release term, and it is going to be a very gut-wrenching and heartbreaking time. But again, this is what Israel needs to do, and then continue fighting whatever it needs to fight, and go and continue reshaping the Middle East with the strategic opportunities and managing the strategic risks.
Absolutely. Well, the war is not over. That is something that we need to keep in mind. This is merely a cessation of hostility in one of the 7 fronts. Of course, 2 of those fronts are currently in a ceasefire. The Houthis have now declared that they will join the ceasefire. Nobody invited them. They may think that they can just unilaterally do so, but nonetheless, their belligerence in the high seas, freedom of navigation, and against the state of Israel will not go unanswered. But let's now turn to elsewhere here in Jerusalem, where we're joined by Oli Sascha, the head of the research department at the IDSF, the Israel Defense and Security Forum, known in Israel as the Bitronistim. It's good to see you all. I'd like to ask you particularly about the contents of this deal, because if I may phrase a Dutch term, I didn't feel very comfortable in my own skin when looking at the details of this deal. Nevertheless, I had an extensive conversation with somebody involved in the formulation of the deal and the discussions, and he put it to me in clear terms and definitions of what may occur within that context. And one thing that he highlighted to me, that the objectives of this war will not be put aside. Israel will remain adamant on achieving all of the objectives of the war, be it through warfare or diplomacy, one of the two, but nonetheless, Hamas will not rule Gaza post this war, and that is something that the Trump administration has guaranteed to the state of Israel, as well as reassured Israel that if it does not achieve this via diplomatic means, it may return to active warfare. What are we to take out of that, and to what degree are the various calculations related to this also in the calculus of the enemy?
Look, obviously, we're not jealous of any political echelon that has to make this decision. But as you said, we're not comfortable in our own skin saying this deal. In fact, we're a bit itchy, so to speak, because the Israeli public generally fears that we will go back to October 6th, meaning that the Hamas will be as threat on Israeli civilians as it was before the war. And it's not as difficult for this terrorist group supported by Iran to rearm and regroup and plan another October 7. And I have to tell you something. We have become disillusioned from nice promises about the future of Gaza and the next operations and so on. If Israel does not resume the war at the end of this hostage deal, that will be a very hard sell to the Israeli public. And I think that, yes, an objective of this war is to release the hostages. Of course, it's a debt that Israel has to its citizens. But then a strategic objective, the final status of this war would be to really usher in a new reality in the Gaza Strip. And we have an opportunity now that we've never faced before, and we used to have international legitimacy to do just that. But I have to say that up until now, there was mainly the White House that has pressured Israel to do the opposite, namely not to win a war. Israel has, for the past 50 years, has not defined a war objective as winning a war, but rather postponed the next round ever since the Yom Kippur War to the date, to be honest, October 6, 1973. We all remember how before, at the eve of the Six-Day War, the Johnson administration pressured Israel not to launch a preemptive strike, and Haddon, the CIA representative in Israel, pressured heavily Meir Amit, the head of the CIA, head of the Mossad, not to launch a preemptive strike until such guarantees were given to the Americans. Now I feel like the Trump administration has a completely different tone to it. They are well aware of that the Hamas evil in Gaza is a problem of the free world and the United States. It is standing in the way of peace process in the Middle East. And so they are determined, in my opinion, to allow Israel to resume fighting, to release the other 60 hostages, and to finish off Hamas that perpetrated the worst massacre against Jewish people since the Holocaust. I think they're determined. I think they're clear-eyed about it, as we are. And I'm confident that we will see hostages back home, as well as we'll resume the fighting to complete the other objectives of this war.
Turning to eastern Israel today, where we're joined by a former commander in the Israeli Air Force and a fighter pilot, namely Brigadier General in Reserve, Redik Shafir. It's great to see you, General. I'd like to also immediately ask you, from a broader perspective, what are the implications of the ceasefire when we're talking, for instance, if we take the Houthis into account, declaring themselves a type of inclusion in the ceasefire deal? Is that something that Israel can take seriously at this point in time, considering the fact that the Houthis have launched repeated attacks against Israel and have not really paid a price for it? Same goes for freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. I mean, and the adjacent waterways. We're talking here about a terror organization, an Iranian proxy, that managed to block one of the most strategic waterways, namely Bab el-Mandeb Strait, without too much of an effort.
Yes, but let's start off with the Houthis. The Houthis live in the Bronze Age, and so it's really not very threatening to try to send them back to the Stone Age. And as such, there aren't too many points to attack in Yemen for people who are in a pretty destitute living standard. So, and they haven't really caused much damage to Israel itself. I think one person was killed from a drone, and all the rest, basically, of their ICBMs, or the missiles, ballistic missiles, were taken out by either the THAAD or our own arrow. So I wouldn't put too much emphasis. They did block the straits, and that is a point of international shipping. And I think the United States and Britain did cause some damage to the Houthis. But if we look on the larger scale, strategic scale, the war is over. Certainly, if you take a look at the northern front from Hezbollah, who've been defeated badly, and you can see the political changes in Lebanon reflecting that, of a new president and a new prime minister who are, I would say, hostile to Hezbollah. Their ability to be supported by Syria is non-existent, as Syria has overthrown President Assad. Iran is actually kicked out of the area and suffered some losses themselves. This we will see in the resolution of the Ukraine campaign in Russia, which is tied to the fate of Iran. And about Gaza, the war is over. The thinking that we may go back to fighting is, I would say, wishful thinking, because the release of the other hostages, about 2/3 of the hostage deal, will have to do with Israel withdrawing from Gaza and coming to some resolution of probably a joint administration by the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, with some of the Arab countries guaranteeing a restructuring of Gaza. And this will probably be part of the next part of the deal. And of course, guarantees from the United States and its allies that Israel will not go back into war with Hamas staying low, but still taking part in the administrative part in Gaza. They will not lose all their weapons. The Gaza won't be demilitarized. You can't go and seek each house to find whether they have missiles or not. And so the idea that we'll go back into fighting has no political backing from the United States and the international community. And Israel will have to cooperate with the Palestinian Authority in order to choose between bad and worse, where the Palestinian Authority is not supported by Israel, not by Netanyahu or its right-wing part of the government, but they will have to swallow these frogs, as we say in Hebrew, within the coming year. It's going to be very difficult for them to do that and show their face to the Israeli public as someone who, or those who did not stand by their word. But from this time on, I think the United States will call the shots. And Trump doesn't seem to want the war to restart again.
With this part, I agree. The fact that Trump does not want the war to restart. With that being said, the Middle East is fickle. The Islamist Hamas will not stay relevant unless it fights, and therefore it's bound to break the terms and conditions of the ceasefire, with American guarantees to restart this war in the event that that happens. So from that perspective, time will tell, naturally. But what I've heard in Washington is a different tone, at least from the incoming administration officials, who are quite adamant on focusing on broader objectives rather than the Palestinian issue. And therefore, the Palestinian issue is far down the priority line, irrespective of the destruction of the Gaza Strip, which now Hamas needs to figure out, or Hamas or the next Palestinian leadership needs to figure out where to get all those funds from. Qatar cannot do it alone, particularly not if it's also planning on trying to rehabilitate Syria, where it's also not able to do it alone. So there is plenty of levers on those various countries that are supportive of Hamas. Turkey, which is of course also supportive of Hamas, is in one of its worst states on the economic dimension, and therefore it's not really an active player when it comes to rehabilitation, other than its own construction companies, which it would be more than happy to employ, considering the slowdown in the Turkish economy. But General Lozen, I'd like to hear your take on this briefly, since I want also to touch on the Lebanese file, where we saw today French President Emmanuel Macron arrive and highlight his hope to see a reinvigoration of the sovereignty of Lebanon following the capitulation of Hezbollah in the face of Israel, irrespective of the fact that it's still a political force in Lebanon to be reckoned with.
Yes, I think that it is in everyone's interest that the reshaping of the internal politics and internal reality in Lebanon is changed. We really use the opportunity that was created by the defeat of Hezbollah, to really change how Lebanon operates now. And I think we're seeing the beginning of something completely new. Hezbollah is down and is degraded to a very low position politically. They basically they are agreeing to everything that is going on just to stay relevant and not completely get kicked out. But Lebanon, like Lebanon, it has a built-in, very unstable system. And I'm not sure how strong it will be after the reshaping of the political system with this new president in place. Having said that, I think that if we look again in the broader picture, if we have an Israeli-Saudi normalization along with the Lebanese normalization, this might be a very strong anchor, sort of, to build upon other stabilizing effects. So then Gaza can be also with some kind of external force, with Israel responsible for borders. This is something with which I agree and disagree with some of my friends here. Israel needs to be responsible for the security in Gaza. There's no other way to do this. No guarantees will guarantee anything. After we go out of the Philadelphia line, get all the hostages back, we need to go back to the Philadelphia line. That is the only way for us to guarantee that Hamas does not rebuild itself, whoever is there, in a way that it has done in the last decade. And then with a stabilized or expanded Abraham Accords, we might start seeing a Sunni crescent. The big question mark with which all of us have is how Syria will reshape itself. And in that sense, we have to think outside of the box about how the Golan, the south of Damascus area, is governed with Israeli and maybe Jordanian and American influence there, to make sure that we're not getting sort of the PKK in Turkey in the Golan Heights on the Syrian side, and we have, instead of Hezbollah, now we have these guys, these crazy extreme Sunnis. So there's a lot going on as we speak, and I think the next few months are going to be critical in reshaping how we continue to take care of a new structure, a new security structure for Israel's long-term future.
Mr. Issachar, I'd like to ask you on the Syrian file, since we saw the Qatari Prime Minister and Foreign Minister coming for a meeting with Abu Muhammad al-Julani, the de facto jihadist ruler of Damascus, during the course of which the latter actually said openly, I think he caught his visitor by surprise, that Qatar committed to launch a full-scale campaign of disinformation against Israel in order to drive it out of the Golan Heights and the demilitarized zone, basically, that it took control over. And beyond that, to start a pressure campaign in the United States and in Europe, basically foreign interference, in order to also, again, go against Israel about the Syria topic. Of course, there was not one word about the fact that Turkey has captured lands due to legitimate security concerns. Nevertheless, Qatar and Turkey and the jihadist Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in Damascus are aligned on everything in this matter, and they're seeking also to lift sanctions on Syria. All of this, of course, is deeply concerning, not only for Israel, but also for Jordan, which is going to be impacted by the fact that this jihadist organization is keen on seeing a different type of regime in Jordan, and also other countries in the region, be it Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and others from the GCC.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see how Jolani himself right now is facing a new reality, maybe the paradox of power, where you rebel, reach power, and then you have to make concessions and weigh in all sorts of considerations. And absolutely, I mean, Turkey's involvement here with Qatar, the whole Ikhwan, the Muslim Brotherhood movement, is striking. Within 10 days, they managed to do what civil war in Syria did not manage to do in 10 years. And Turkey itself, as much as it ties it to security concerns, is now the largest occupier of Arab land anywhere in the world, larger than Israel's Judean Samaria province. Is currently Turkifying and occupying large swaths of northern Syria. And so Erdogan is kind of playing a dangerous game here, throwing stones out of a glass house and attempting to sort of expand the Turkish sphere of influence. And it is quite disturbing that Israel may be facing the replacement of Iranian entrenchments in Syria, the Shiite crescent, to a Muslim Brotherhood crescent led by Erdogan, if and so Jolani so chooses to align with Erdogan and with Turkey. So we may see a replacement of Iranian presence with Turkish and Muslim Brotherhood presence right across the Israeli border in the north. And if I may just briefly weigh in the whole issue of Gaza, that would be a very hard sell to the Israeli public to bring the Palestinian Authority back to Gaza. One of the great things about being a sovereign country is not to rely on guarantees from other countries. The General Allen plan from 2013 from the Obama administration to place American troops in the Jordan Valley or along the Judean Samaria border to protect Israel. Israel does not want foreign boots on the ground, nor security guarantees, nor can the PA right now, with a state of legitimacy in the Palestinian street, effectively control Gaza. And the danger here is to fall back to land back on the same patterns of the past, to sort of turn the hourglass back to the next October 7, much like we did in the years before, with a misconception of how we, in a very chilling way, were, counting down the minutes until our own massacre, because we were caught in this illusion of silence on the other side of the border. So until such time the Palestinians change their behavior, there can be no replacement for Israeli long-term presence in the Gaza Strip along the Philadelphia corridor. And that may be a hard truth to the Middle East. That would be needing a coalition here to try to lift some of the responsibility off Israel's shoulders. But there's no magic solution here. I think Israel tried magic solutions for years with the Oslo Accords, even the Lebanon-Gaza Accord. All these things did not quite do the trick. And if Israel is interested in long-term security and to avoid another massacre, I think there is no alternative to long-term presence and nourish local leadership in independent Palestinian municipalities.
Indeed. Well, solutions need to be found because open-ended also presence does not constitute a viable solution either. So we do need to find a sort of formula that will be thinking outside of the box and providing a new reality for many civilians who do want to live there in peace and security and do not necessarily have ill intents towards Israel. Not many these days, but nonetheless, also those exist. But General Shafir, we don't have very much time left. Masoud Pezeshkian, the president of Iran, met today with his Russian counterpart in Moscow, Vladimir Putin, namely, during the course of which they both spoke about a strategic partnership that is going to be signed, and the Iranian president also highlighted the aspirations of Iran to have Russia enter in Iran and help it construct additional nuclear facilities. What should we take out of that?
I think that these are bargaining chips towards the resolution of the Ukraine war. Russia, who's in dire straits, both militarily and economically, and even socially, are going to grapple with President Trump wanting to end the war in Ukraine, and they want to bolster their position when the dialogue begins to show as much strength as they can. As we saw, they didn't lift a finger for Syria as it collapsed. They're at some odds with Turkey and are relocating elsewhere in the Mediterranean, namely to Libya. And Iran are also in deep trouble. And so they're trying to align to find a way to grapple with the next move of the Americans in that area. It is quite clear that the war in the Ukraine is nearing an end. There also, both sides are gearing up for better positions towards the dialogues.
Indeed. Well, thank you, General Shafir, General Ozen, and Mr. Issachar for all of your insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next update from here in Jerusalem, wishing you already a Shabbat Shalom.